The Roman Republic was in a dire state. The army wasn't at full strength, the economy was weak, the political scene unstable just like public opinion, and now the Etruscan Wars had begun. Unlike the Samnites, who were rather easily defeated by Gaius Calvus and Prima Italica, the nation of Tarquina was going to be too much for them to handle on their own. Not only did they have a larger economy, which meant larger armies, but also they were favored by other external powers declaring war on us right before we could strike the final blow. Tarquina was most likely going to defeat the Umbrians, our trade partners to our east, taking control of the mountains and opening up another front. However, this also left their rich core provinces within the plains right for us to exploit. This offensive was launched without the aid of Camillus, whose frustrations from being denied a war against the Frentani kept him away from the front line. This in turn also diminished the domination of the Furian family, although a great many of them were operating as governors throughout the Republic. As part of this new conflict, the Senate bestowed a series of objectives for us to complete, such as developing a new training reform and construct a new temple of Jupiter, both reasonable requests which would serve Rome greatly. We immediately took initiative on the reforms and began the construction in Latium, which struggled to abandon its Italic ways. Attila tried to lead Legio Gemina out of the province, but quickly realized this was impossible without a rebellion rising in their absence. A series of governors were appointed along the coastal ports to help stabilize the province. Up north, after squashing a minor Veii rebellion, Gaius Calvus marched into Ostia, from where he would merge and reinforce Legio Prima Italica for a proper offensive, one that would drastically drain the Roman economy. With a reasonably drilled army from the training reforms, he besieged the Tarquinian capital. Every night he expected an army to break the fog of war and lift the siege. This fear eventually overtook Calvus, who ordered a bloody assault resulting in extreme casualties, but also a few walls to hide behind. From here he hired a couple of Etruscan mercenaries to assist in the war effort. The mercenaries were paid for by the Daunians, who despite their great progress in conquering the south asked for our support against a random Greek colony. Thinking nothing of it, we agreed to this, not understanding this inevitably would lead to a Greek warlord with a claim to the Macedonian Empire, which was yet to be formed, getting called over from Greece. An event we surely couldn't have foreseen. But Rome needed the denarii just like the cavalry, which the subdued allied tribes supplied us with. Not all that surprising, by 389 BC, Marcus Camillus was declared consul again with Catulus of Legio Gemina. With the recently appointed governors, it was now somewhat safe for Catulus to march north. Along the way, he would reinforce his army with more capable fighters. After a series of weeks awaiting an Etruscan counterattack, we discovered they were just one region away from reaching Rome through the mountains. This was both a serious threat, but also the catalyst for Calvus once again marching out expecting no armies were nearby, except this quickly turned out to be false near Velusna. Just like he did against the Samnites, Calvus began raiding the countryside, hoping to lure the army away from the town, but instead ended up simply scoring a lot of loot and delaying the confrontation enough for Catulus to reach the north, which thus allowed Gaius Calvus to take on the Etruscan army all alone. This small trick evened the odds a bit. Despite our inferior infantry, the fact that we brought more cavalry allowed us to overwhelm their flanks and slowly take down one hostile hoplite unit at a time. This effectively allowed Catulus to storm the town and steal their gold. Here he established an auxiliary camp which would allow us to train any Etruscans willing to join our side in the conflict. However, that minor victory over the Tarquinian army only brought us into further danger, with a full-strength army within reach to counterattack. Furthermore, after getting rid of some Scythian slaves, many patricians threatened to break off from the state. Camillus had to pull a lot of strings to avoid further issues, which slowly began diminishing the Furian dominance over the Senate. This was also why Camillus began mustering a legion of his own named Victrix. After this, the victorious Gaius Calvus led Prima Italica down towards the coast, from where he would march north to conquer more land. Catulus, on the other hand, stayed behind to defend Velusna. However, his army was no match for the numbers sent against them. Despite some initial success through javelins and an attempt to encircle the enemy, our positions were overrun with the commander falling soon thereafter. This defeat quickly led to violent debates in the Senate, where one man eventually insulted the plebs. The only way to resolve the situation was by scolding the petition, which led to some grumbling but nothing more. With the destruction of Legio Gemina, Camillus marched to Veii, from where he would recruit our former enemies into the army. This was quite controversial, as these units mainly fought with swords and axes, rather than the standard spears. Once Legio Victrix was ready, Camillus led them out to avenge the fallen Romans, but feared a proper assault on the town, and thus decided to pillage the land instead, waiting for the reinstated Legio Gemina to muster more troops. Except there wasn't really time for this, as another Tarquinian army was approaching from the mountains. Camillus had to attack now. This was the first time in Roman history a full-out non-mercenary melee unit was deployed on the battlefield, a fact that over time would change the world forever. The swordsmen were placed on each flank, with one side heavily reinforced by all the Succi cavalry. This flank would in superior fashion overwhelm and destroy the Etruscans, basically saving the spear-wielding units that desperately fought in the middle. The swordsmen, despite their controversy, proved to be highly effective. Camillus, however, was tired after the last battle, and thus delegated the recapture of Velusta to the new commander, which resulted in quite a few casualties. So many in fact the Etruscans immediately felt confident enough to counterattack. But unlike the last defeat, this time the Roman armies were led by Marcus Camillus himself. He left a small garrison within the camp, while he personally led the light infantry out against the Etruscan vanguard. They had no chance, meaning once the main assault unfolded, the swordsmen marched out to rapidly take down the enemy reserve units, making it possible to hammer into the blob of Etruscans from all sides, causing an immediate chain rout. Under the command of Marcus Camillus, the newly raised Legio Victrix was quickly becoming one of the most feared armies in all of Italy, famed for their formidable warriors. An army that after 3 successive battles now had to replenish. Due to a lack of Roman conversion speed around the border territories, this was only possible at Rome herself. Elsewhere, Gaius Calvus and Prima Italica met little to no resistance during their march along the coast. And by the year 385 BC, after the conquest of Velathri, formed a border with the Ligurians from the Po Valley, a warlike people that had begun expanding further south, and also shortly after establishing contact, declared war on us. This of course was a major problem, as both Calvus and Camillus were intending to limit the Etruscans to the Apennines by taking the last northern regions they controlled. Taking advantage of this sudden destruction, the Etruscans for the 3rd time attacked the region of Lusna. The by far inferior garrison was desperately holding on, fearing death was imminent. However, after discovering this attack, Camillus and Legio Victrix rushed back south, with the tyrant leading the cavalry in advance and the infantry close behind. In a highly coordinated manner, they demolished the Etruscans, taking down anyone in their way until the attackers were completely surrounded. It was a decisive victory. By returning to command, Camillus had effectively destroyed the Tarquinian armies. The success allowed him to push north and link up with Gaius Calvus to conquer Aritum, a Celtic stronghold located within the province of Tuscia. This was just the first step in driving the Celts out of Italy. During the early years of the Roman Republic, our ambitions didn't expand beyond Italy yet, but rather if we could secure control over the Celtic town of Pisa or even Luna, we would have a strong position from which to fend off the barbarians. This would allow us to pursue a more feasible goal, which was to establish hegemony over the Italian peninsula, and for that we had to push east. This was something our enemies continued to encourage, with now the Senones drawing their arms against us. However, As there was some distance between our two nations and due to the concentration of Roman forces at Velusna, Camillus chose to join them, while Calvus patrolled the north, seizing opportunities as they appeared. In order to unravel these moments of luck, agents were dispatched all along the northern border. He would soon be reinforced by his brother Publius and Legio Invicta, another unauthorized army, which drastically drained the treasury. With in principle 2 legions and a desperate need of gold, Camillus launched the invasion of the Apennines. He defeated the Spoletian garrison on the field, allowing him to enter the city unopposed. This sadly wasn't enough to balance out the economy. Taxes were raised to a historic high, causing massive unrest throughout the fast-growing republic. This was also why the following summer was immediately utilized to further confiscate the mounted settlements. These regions would over time prove to be highly rebellious, as you can see from this massive army right here, which Legio Gemini barely kept out. With the fall of Catullus, the paterfamilias of the Aemilian family earlier in this war, their desperation for peace once again took center stage. This was in straight contrast to our current development, meaning the province of Campania, our only source of food, was at risk of breaking away. The only way to solve the situation this time was by sending certain members out on diplomatic missions to, for instance, the Frentani. Unexpectedly, this was quite beneficial, as they handed over control of a random port along the eastern coast of Italy. Despite further taxation opportunities, this didn't help with our economy. The upkeep of the legions was exceptionally high, and we couldn't afford to spare any of them, as the Ligurians were amassing near Pisa.